well, let's talk about type 1 and type 2 errors, and in the context of a problem. And when we have type 1, type 2 errors, they're leading us to hypothesis testing and whether or not we accept or reject a null hypothesis, and whether that was right or not. Okay, and then we're going to talk about the consequences of each error in the given setting. So without further ado, let's see some notes. So you probably want to copy this down. All right, about type 1 and type 2 errors. And what we have right here is type 1 errors. Okay, type 1 errors is where the null hypothesis is true, but we make the wrong decision. Okay, so this occurs by chance of whatever the alpha value is. Okay, our level of significance. So we have right here is type 2 error, on the other hand, is where the alternate hypothesis is true, but we make the wrong decision. Now, one way of kind of looking at this is there is a little diagram that you can find on the internet. You can check out in other places as well. All right. And so you can pause this video when you want to check out the things. But right here is a little truth table right there. So given that type 1 error, what we know is that we are given that the null is true. Okay, so we're given that the null is true. All right, and type where an error occurs in this probability right here, given that so we basically reject the null, but it is true. So what's the probability of rejecting null given that it is true? Well, that's going to be whatever the alpha value is. Okay, that's our level of significance that we have right there. Because when we set this up, all right, the probability of this actually occurring is going to be usually whatever alpha is. And then the probability of getting the correct conclusion, because that's what we want. So in order to get saying that given that this is true and then failing to reject it, well, that would be the correct assumption. Well, that would be 1 minus whatever alpha is. And that kind of makes sense. Well, that does make sense because when you think about when we do our type 1 errors, all right, we're always assuming that the null is true. And so then we have this little alpha value that we have right there. And essentially we have this part. And out of all these different things, if we get anything in this region, all right, from our sample, all right, anywhere in this region, we would reject the null hypothesis. Well, sometimes our sample can be wrong, all right? So when we get a sample, all right, either proportion or even a mean, and if we get something in that sample, all right, that goes against what our null is, but it is so unlikely to occur. Well, it's still, though unlikely, still could occur. Well, that would be a type 1 error. Okay, that would be a type 1 error. And so what is that probability? Whatever alpha is. All right, the rest of it is pretty much we're basically saying that, well, we'll take all this other stuff. That's where we'll be correct. All right, that's where we will be correct. So right here, we're saying that it falls in this region, but it still is going to be okay. We just made an error. So that is type 1 error. Now, type 2 error is where, and I'm going to write this out, the probability of getting a type 2 error, all right, is a different assumption because now we're looking at this category, and in this one, we are finding the probability of where actually, where we know the alternate hypothesis is true, okay, so well, we don't know that, but the alternate hypothesis is true. However, we fail to reject it. Okay, so we fail, all right, to reject, all right, the null. Okay, and so really we should have rejected it, but we failed to reject it. Okay. All right, so this actually was true, but that actually didn't happen. So essentially, we get a point over here, all right, somewhere in this area, but in actuality, all right, the alternate was actually true. Okay, so true. And so it actually should have been more in this area. And so we have to figure out the probability of that occurring. Okay, and so that is what we sometimes know as the power of the test. Okay, the power of the test. All right, the power of correctly concluding that each of it is true. And we're going to talk about more about the power later on. But um, that is what we know about, all right, type 1 and type 2 errors. That's when they will occur. So when the alternate is true, all right, however, we fail to reject it, or we reject it because we actually think it's false. Okay, and over here, type 1 errors are where the hypothesis is true, but we think it's actually false. All right, and that's what a type 1 error is. All right, we're going to go through the problems in the next video, but take these notes, and hopefully this helps in your